So this presentation, it's on chapter 19 of the textbook. It's all about teaching Baroque music. It's titled An Approach to Playing Bach and Scarlatti. It's mostly about Bach since, right, he's the definitely one of the most important Baroque keyboard composers, but it has a little bit about Scarlatti too, which is good. Okay, so to start out with, it talks about, right, the instruments of the Baroque period, which I think is really important whenever we're discussing Baroque music, because it's important to think about the context it was written in. And yeah, what instrument it's written for. I think that's pretty important. So the two primary instruments in the Baroque period were the clavichord and the harpsichord. They're keyboard instruments like our modern piano, but they're a lot different. It's like we know one for press the key on the piano, the hammer hits the string, right, vibrates. Okay, with a harpsichord, it has this little thing called a plectra, and it plucks the string. The sound decays a lot faster too. And then the clavichord, it's even different. It just touches the string, which is odd, but it's a clavichord. Some other things about the clavichord. It can do gradual dynamics. The harpsichord can't do gradual dynamics at all, no matter how hard or soft you press the key. Clavichord can even do vibrato, which I find really interesting. So it's very soft, right, because it's just a really small instrument, so it's going to be soft. And then the player can affect the sound throughout the duration, which, right, you have vibrato, so you can do that. Okay, and for the harpsichord, this is the other Baroque keyboard instrument, so it's used more rather than a clavichord for performances, just because it can project so much better in a concert hall, because it is a bigger instrument, and the tone is just a bit more clear, I guess, than the clavichord. Okay. So, again, the strings are plucked by the plectra. I don't think most harpsichords they'll be like double manual. So for keyboard, I have my keyboard here. So you have the single keyboard, that's single manual. For a harpsichord you'll have double manual, so right, it'll be two levels of keyboard. Yeah. Okay. That's the double manual. And they also have stops on the end, so there'll be little things you can pull out. Right, there's the lute stop. Makes it sound like a lute. That's pretty self-explanatory. There's other ones, and then all harpsichords are different. But so it can change dynamic, but only dynamic levels, right? So it can't do gradual dynamic shaping like a piano or a clavichord can do. But it does have timbre changes, like with the lute stop. It does affect how it sounds a lot. Okay. So terrace dynamics, and then it provides better transparency for contrapuntal textures because of the action. It's just a lot clearer, more I think crisp sounding than a piano. So it just helps us, I guess, hear it a little more clearly whenever we're doing that. Okay. So this chapter had several sections about Baroque playing, so I'm just going to go section by section. The first one talks about tempo. So yeah, the author is very specific with tempo in here. He starts off saying that the effectiveness is based on the context. So if the notes, if it's mostly doesn't have any ornamentation at all, or maybe not too many 30-second notes or something, so we can play it a little faster. But basically, if we have a bunch of ornamentation, we don't want to play it too fast because it makes it all muddy with the harpsichord. Yeah, if you play things too quickly on the harpsichord, it's going to sound really clunky and awkward, so we need to make sure the tempo is very appropriate. Alright, so precision with rhythm and ornaments. So yeah, rhythm too, because ornaments, they're rhythmic, so you need to pay attention to both rhythm and ornaments. Yeah. And then he gives tempos he talks about dance music. He has very precise tempo for each thing, down to the beat per minute. So, which yeah, it's important because we don't want to make the music either too slow or like the notes, like they decay. For the harpsichord, it doesn't sound very rich, and we also don't want it to be clunky. Okay. So the next part is about rhythm, which it's related to tempo. So he lists out like 5 points for what we should think about whenever we're doing rhythmic, and then rhythmic freedom. Okay. So see, he says that when performing, it's difficult to like on paper, it's difficult to notate the subtleties and slight changes we make whenever we're performing. Right. So like if we're doing rubato, we can't notate every single little change in how long we hold the note, or if we speed up or slow down the section. Obviously, it's not like romantic era music, but there's a little bit of a fluctuation with Baroque music too. So, yeah, I know one rhythm that typically we change quite a bit in Baroque music is the dotted 8th 16th note, or anything in relation to that. Like, I have the Partita number 5 by Bach out here that I'll play a few examples from. But yeah, so this has a dotted 16th note, then 32nd note, and then here it has a dotted 8th 16th note. But basically, we can like change those a little bit. We can't notate it properly on the score, but just as performers, I guess it's our job to be able to do those stylistically conscious. Yeah. Okay. And then he talks about dance music, so we want to emphasize the longer notes and the shorter notes, and we would do this by making the longer notes even longer, the shorter notes even shorter. Right, just kind of creates some variety, keeps it interesting. So, and he says that this can be observed in Chopin polonaises and habaneras, but not Chopin waltzes or mazurkas. So it depends on the dance music, but I think it's interesting that we can see this in even like romantic era music. Okay. And then number 3 is that larger works have continuity between movements. So if you see like a weird change in rhythm, I think the examples he pointed out were super clear to me, but like 8th notes and 16th notes, if you see that suddenly it's like, oh, it's different, you should notice it and then be suspicious of it. So you should bring it back into the context of the piece as a whole. Okay. And then I really like the next 2 points. And the first, number 4 is if something feels awkward, it's probably wrong, which, that's like, feels awkward probably sounds awkward, so should always just listen to our ears. Whatever. But, yeah, so here it talks about that dotted 8th 16th note rhythm. So if we're playing both the dotted 8th 16th, and then we're doing making it like a triplet in the same piece, that's gonna feel pretty awkward. So yeah, I'll go ahead. I have the Allemande from the Bach Partita number 5. Yes, so yeah, this has the dotted 8th 16th note. So I'm not gonna play the whole thing. I'll just kind of skip around to 2 different sections, but yeah, so the first time I'm going to do it more like a triplet, right? Because the left hand has triplets, so it does make sense. And then over here, if I played it straight 16 notes, not straight 16 notes, but with a more dotted rhythm, it would just sound and feel really awkward. So oops. Let's try it again. Okay. Right, that wasn't super great, but I haven't played that in a while. Okay, and then over in the next part, if we suddenly change that rhythm to more dotted rhythm, it's like longer notes, longer, shorter notes, shorter, it's going to sound weird in the context of the piece, right? Because especially if we do the original, it feels awkward. It probably sounds awkward. And then it says if it sounds unpleasant, it's probably wrong. He talks about if it's over dotted or just not dotted at all. So I guess if we way over dot our rhythms and make it, that sounds like, Flash or something. right? Not very clear, just flowing, I guess. Okay, so he says ritardandi and accelerandi, they can be used sparingly, so it has to be with the context of the piece. So like in romantic era music, it's very dramatic. We're gonna giant ritardandos and accelerandos. But in Baroque music, well, we don't want to, right? It's not romantic era music, so obviously we don't want to play it like romantic era music. I guess we shouldn't play it like romantic era music. So it has to be like within the context of the phrase, right? So like if we're going to the climax, the harmonic or rhythmic climax, maybe we can like stretch it a little bit, and then yeah, we can accelerando in other places. So, but yeah, and then here it says, yeah, we can use a little fluctuation. He says it's similar to tempo rubato, which I found was interesting, because, yeah, it is, just a little bit of freedom. And he said it is important for the big beats to remain steady while we are doing this, because we don't want it to be way too tempo rubato, and especially if it's dance music, right? Okay. The next part is dynamics. So there's dynamic levels and dynamic shaping. Dynamic levels, so I think more like forte or piano. Those are like the things like the big picture boxes, and the dynamic shaping, that's like within each one. So we can kind of shape the dynamics. For piano, we can make some spots a little softer. If we have like when we get to the climax of the phrase, we can make it a little louder. And then, well, the same with like forte. But okay. And then we don't want to change dynamic levels randomly in a Baroque piece. It should only be either between movements, or it says here like between like if there's like a 2D part and a solo part, we can do it there just to differentiate between, right, everyone plays together and just the soloist. He says, or an echo effect too, which I think is smart. But yeah, for the harpsichord to be able to, which again, thinking about harpsichord, to be able to change dynamics like really dramatically, right? Well, if we had a double manual harpsichord, we would have to like, right, move our hands up there. So we think about the time it takes to do that, and basically that's why we don't want to change it like randomly in the middle, or like in the middle of a phrase, which we wouldn't do that anyways. But yeah, just thinking about like movement, and then obviously the stops too. So you only want to do it like I can make the prelude like a little louder than the allemande, but I want to make it right. First half of the allemande be really loud, and the second half be really soft. Okay. And then since Scarlatti comes closer to the classical period, his dynamics, they're a little more varied, because the classical period is whenever, right, we had the forte piano, which had a lot greater dynamic freedom. That's when Mozart, he would be writing dynamic, all these different dynamic symbols in his music. So Scarlatti was he was anticipating the classical period, so he has a little more, he's a little more, I guess, like dramatic with his dynamics, if you can even, that's the right word, but anyways, so they're just indicated a little more differently. Okay. And then, since we can't use dynamics really to shape our phrases too much, we use articulation and timing. Articulation is very, very important. So, alright, if we're getting to like the harmonic climax, maybe, yeah, like I said before, we might like stretch it out or something. Maybe like speed up certain other parts, but anyways, we'll get to more. Articulation is the next section, so I'll save that for there. But for dynamics, he lists, so yeah, it's also 5 points again. So this is things that we should just remember whenever we're thinking about dynamics, or whenever our students are playing dynamics, and we should remind our students about this or teach them it. Okay. So it says that phrase shape is based on rhythmic and harmonic considerations. So we're going to climax on the longest or most harmonically dissonant note. So I guess this is why it's important to analyze our music, just so we can figure out where the climaxes are, because especially in fugues, right, it gets very busy, so we just need to be able to tell which spots should be louder than other ones. Or, well, maybe not really louder, but which spots are the climax of the phrase. Okay, and then structurally important notes should be emphasized. So where is, I can find this section. So like in this part I have, that's in the prelude of the partita. The notes E and G, they're part of the chord for this. And then that's just a little, right, the passing tone going up. So I would emphasize the E and the G. Hopefully it comes across on the video, but yeah. So it's just thinking about that, especially when you have like sequences like that, very notey sequences. We don't want to make it sound all the same. Alright, that's kind of boring. So, and each small unit must have its own shape that fits into the context of the longer phrase. So, again, the same spot for this prelude. Well, the left hand has this. It goes up and then down, so I could be like crescendo or lead up to that top note and then go back down, kind of like this. Alright, so maybe I'm trying to exaggerate a little bit for the sake of the hearing it on the video, but you could do a little bit of dynamic contrast within each sequence, and then for the phrase, like the phrase was going towards that F sharp, G, A. So I'm going towards. So I'm going to crescendo there. Plus it's going upwards. Okay. And then since most phrases begin on a weak beat and move to strong beats, so a crescendo works good for forward motion. The example he gave of the fugue, that was a pretty good one. I couldn't really find any place in here that did that too much, but yeah. And then be sensitive to the decays of long notes, because luckily my keyboard has a clavichord option. Because for harpsichord, I haven't played a clavichord, but the notes just decay a lot faster. So like, I'll turn up just in case you can't hear it. Alright, so it's like not even making sound anymore, but for piano, it's loud. This sound just sustains much, much longer. So it's important to just be conscientious of the decays of the long note. Okay. Articulation, phrasing. Okay. Very, very important part of Baroque music. So it says it's indispensable to the success of a performance. Right, so tension between articulation and phrasing is essential. Right, because articulation's, dynamics, kind of, articulation's even more important for phrasing than like it would be in like romantic air music, right? Like the staccatos. There's a broad range of different articulations we can use. When they, like the most legato one I mentioned was finger pedaling, right? Which is also good for harpsichord because harpsichord doesn't have a pedal. At least the one I played on didn't have a pedal. But alright, so it just helps hold the notes since they don't sustain like with the pedal by themselves. And that'd of course be good with piano. So it's just thinking about pedaling and then, well, the finger pedaling, and then there's like staccato, right? That would be very short. I said staccatissimo, right? So, and we can also think about that whenever we're phrasing. So, if we're getting to a, right, like the harmonic climax, we might hold the note for long. That might be the note we hold the longest in that whole phrase because we're leading up to it, and then we would prep that note with the silence from the note before, from that decay. Okay. Yeah, again, 5 little points for articulation here. I'm just going to go over them. So it has to be varied. So it has to be flexible from finger pedaling to staccatissimo. And over that, to emphasize a note, again, like the harmonic climax, right? You can make it longer and prep it. And then if you want to de-emphasize it, you can shorten the note or make the note before it, just kind of hold it a little longer just to kind of, I guess, cover it a little bit. So I'll go ahead and take the very, first 2 measures of this prelude. So, yeah, I would say the most important chord is that C major from the there I held it a little longer, and then so I can make that first note, the G major, a little short, and then hold it a little longer like that to emphasize that C major triad. If I want to de-emphasize, like they said, I can make that G major a little longer and then shorten the C major. So I could do. Alright, you can obviously hear that de-emphasizes that C major chord. It says slurs, so the 2-note slurs. So first note's emphasized, the second note has a diminuendo, and crescendo for short slurs. So each note must have more prep than the one before, right? So it's kind of creating that space, so it can lead up and actually like have climax. All right, since we don't have dynamics, well, we do have dynamics, but we don't have as varied dynamics as we do for romantic air music. And then it says for larger intervals, you detach more, and then you also do the same for slower notes. So, like in the Bach conventions, we're gonna really detach, well, especially that octave. Even the fifth is like a large interval, so we're gonna, and their eighth notes too, so not too fast. But instead of like I thought I mentioned vocal here. Instead of those are 16th notes going down stepwise, so we're not gonna detach them because they're fast and smaller intervals. So that would be a slur. We would play those with. Yep. And then another really important thing about articulations is it's important not to chop the phrase whenever we're doing it. So we don't want to add like so much space whenever we're prepping that the phrase just like cuts off and we have like 2 or 3 weird phrases like instead of one long one. So we need to really listen and make sure that we're doing it correctly and just very like with thought. Okay? And then let's see, the last one, ornamentation. This is the last section here. So what I find really, really interesting and very helpful is that Bach wrote an ornamentation table for his son. So the author does not like it at all. Whenever editors like notate in the ornamentation, like note by note, thinks it's a better idea to just look at this table, which I would agree, because of the sensitivity of the ornamentation. It's just nearly impossible to actually write it down perfectly because it's within the context of the piece and everything else in the piece, right? Like tempo, rhythm, dynamics, maybe. So, and then Bach, he was influenced by French keyboard music, Francis Cooper, and he also wrote another ornamentation table. So I guess it would be helpful to have both of those just at hand whenever you're teaching Baroque music and playing it. And then, and other things he says to watch out from editors besides like written out ornamentation, well, there's also like articulation, right? If they add any staccatos, slurs, accents, sometimes they'll do crescendi, diminuendos, dynamics, different other dynamics like that, and retardandos. Okay, I was trying to think of everything, but yeah. Another thing that he says to watch out for besides that, this is an Urtext edition, he says to watch out for like fingerings they put in. So he says whenever we're performing, or whenever we're playing a Baroque piece, instead of thinking about what's more comfortable, like that's the prime thing we should be worried about, we should worry about, well, how do we want this to sound and which fingering is going to help us, right, get that sound the best and the easiest and most effective. Right, so that's just more important than thinking like, I'll play this like with 5 fingers or whatever. It depends on the piece. But and the last thing he writes that I really, really, really like is he says, when teaching Bach, a teacher should help students ask their own questions, which I think is really important just for the students to grow as musicians. So when they're practicing at home, maybe instead of just practicing it aimlessly, they can actually think critically about what they're playing. Yeah. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you.